All right, today we have a 1995 Chevy Camaro with the 3.4 V6 motor, and the water pump is leaking. So we're gonna go ahead and show you how to replace the water pump on this car. The first thing we need to do is just gain access to it. So we'll show you how to do that. All right, on these Camaros, the easiest way to make room is just by taking out the air filter housing and tube, which is really simple. Just loosen the clamp going on the throttle body hose here, and then we'll pop out this air breather hose, and then disconnect the intake air temperature sensor and slide that off. And once that's off, the whole assembly, oh, we got one more hose back here. There we go. And the whole assembly comes out. All right, now the water pump, of course, is behind the water pump pulley, which is right here. And in order to access it, we actually have to remove the power steering pump bracket in order to gain access to half the water pump. But in order to remove the power steering pump bracket, we have to remove the ignition coil bracket. So it's kind of, to get access to one thing, you have to remove one thing, and then another. Yeah. So what we're going to do, now I'm going to try this, and not 100% sure it'll work, but I'm going to try taking off. There's 3 bolts that mount this entire assembly right to this bracket. There's one here, and then one further down here, which you're probably not going to be able to see right now. But I'm going to try taking those off, and if I'm lucky, the whole thing will come right out. Okay, now we have to take off the ignition coil pack assembly. We got the 3 nuts off the bottom, and you can see it pulls up away from the bracket here. Before we can take that off, though, we got to take this cover off that covers the throttle cable assembly. It's getting in the way of the ignition coil pack. So we'll go ahead and take off these 2 bolts and take our cover off here. Okay, now you can see with the ignition coil pack off why we had to take it off. We can now access the bolts that are behind it. Our next step is to take the belt off, but before we take the belt off, I'm going to go ahead and break loose these water pump pulley bolts while there's still tension on the belt. The belt kind of helps hold the pulley in place while we break loose these bolts. So we'll just go ahead and get these all broken loose. You can see the way I do it is if you get the wrench on there and you whack the wrench a little bit with the hammer or something, it'll break loose that bolt. So I'll do that to all 4 of these and take these off. Alright, so I got all 4 of these bolts broken loose. Our next step is going to be to go ahead and take the belt off. I'll just put my wrench on the belt tensioner, and you'll see that as I put tension against the tensioner, it'll actually loosen the belt. So what we do is we pull on the belt tensioner, and the belt will loosen up, and we just pop the belt off one of the pulleys. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and slide the belt off all the pulleys and get the belt out of our way. Now one thing you want to do, first of all, you'll see here that we have a sticker showing the belt routing diagram. Not all cars will have this, or they might be missing or damaged. So if you don't have this on your car, what I recommend doing is just drawing your own. Just draw the circles in the line of how the belt was routed. Just for future reference when you go to put the belt back on. Okay, now we're going to take off these bolts. Alright, what we're going to do next is, now there's a couple ways of doing this. Either you can take off the bolts behind the power steering pump and take off the pump along with this bracket. I'm going to opt for an alternative way, which is to just take off the pulley, and then the pump will stay in place when we go to take off the whole bracket. Alright, this tool is a power steering pump pulley puller, believe it or not. The way it works, you just slide this over the pulley here, and then this tool. Here, let me see if I can show you this a little better. The tool goes like this, and you can see in that cavity there is where the end of this pulley is going to fit when we have it all on, and then this ring just kind of holds it all together. So I'll show you how that goes on. Basically, you just put your puller and butt it up against the pulley here. And you almost need 3 hands to do this, but then you slide your clamping rings and then slide this metal sleeve over it. And then you start tightening this thing down here. Make sure it's all centered. Okay. Now all we have to do is to tighten the center bolt on this puller here. And as you tighten this down, it's literally going to push the pump off of that shaft. Okay. Now the pulley is off. We'll go ahead and take apart our puller. We don't need this part of it anymore. And set our pulley aside. We'll show you how that goes back on later. At this point, you can see there were 4 more bolts we had to get to behind the pulley. So now we've got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bolts that we need to take off in order to get this bracket off. And that will finally give us access to the water pump. So we're going to go ahead and zip those off.
All right, we got our last bolt out, and you'll see at this point, this whole bracket comes right off and out of our way. So we'll take that off, and now we have complete access to the water pump. You can see all around here, still a little tight in here, but we're gonna be able to manage now and get this water pump off. All right, so I'm gonna take off this hose off the water pump here. I don't know if you can see that, this guy there. There's this little section of hose here, and it runs to a solid pipe, and there's two 8mm bolts that hold that pipe in place. So I'm just going to take off these bolts first of all. All right, next we're going to loosen this hose clamp. And slide that up. I'm going to kind of break the seal around this hose. There it goes. Okay, we'll move that out of our way. And it looks like the last thing that's kind of in my way is that belt tensioner. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off just to free up some space. Now this step is really optional. I'm just doing it just to free up a little room around the water pump. I like to have as big of a workspace as I can. Actually, we could just leave it like that. Now again, that step was optional, but you can see now we have more access to the water pump. So what I'll do now is go around and take out all the bolts. Actually, first thing I got to put my catch pan under there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take out all the bolts all the way around the water pump. There's a handful of 10mm and 13mm bolts. So I'm just going to work my way around and take them all out now. Now what I'm going to do as I take them out, I'm going to leave them in the actual water pump, just so we remember where they go when we go to put it all back together. All right, if I didn't miss any, I think I've got all the bolts out now. So what we're going to do is pry on the water pump. And it's not coming. Double check all the bolts. Might just be really stuck and old, like me. Let's see what I got on the other side. There it goes. And most of that missed our catch pan, but whatever. All right. So now Now we're hitting something still. What the heck, man? It's this bolt. There we go. All right, here's our old water pump. One of my bolts fell out into our catch pan, so I got to get that before I lose it. But we'll set that aside. And I still got all the bolts in it, just like the old one, just like they were. And I'm gonna take a breather, and then I'll show you how to clean that up. All right, now I'm gonna clean the gasket surface. What I use for this is a high-speed buffing wheel. It's just a tool with a what I call, well, commonly called a cookie, a cleaning cookie, and it's just hooked up to an air compressor, and it just cleans up any gasket surface. So that's what I'll be using to get it clean. All right, so you can see here our new water pump, which we got from Apdty. What we're going to do now is just swap over the bolts one at a time. And we got our new gasket. I'm going to just hold the gasket in place as I swap over all the bolts here. All right, now they're all swapped over in the same order that they came out. So now we can take the water pump and go ahead and bolt it back on. All right, so we got our water pump. We just kind of lined it up, and there goes a bolt. Knew that would happen. We're just going to start these bolts, and that one probably fell right in the center of the car, which is where things always fall. And the hardest to get to spot. It's kind of the rule of falling bolts, I guess you'd call it. Never fails. Right in the center, every time. Hardest spot to reach. So let me get that. That's probably in a puddle of coolant too. All right, so I went ahead and just snugged all the bolts down with my air ratchet to save time. None of them are actually torqued or tight yet. So what I'm going to do now is just go around by hand and just tighten them all down. You don't want them to be real tight. Just if you're looking for a torque spec, they're probably, I'd say probably about 25 foot-pounds. I'm just going to snug them down, which will be fine on a water pump. Don't quote me on the torque specs. It's every car is different, so your best way of finding out is just to look it up in your repair book. But if you wanted to torque it accurately, again, most people just snug them down by hand, and you'll be fine. All right, we're going to go ahead and put this hose back on. Just slides on, and put our clamp back in place. We'll tighten, put our brackets back in, or bracket bolts back in. Okay, we're going to put our tensioner back on now. All right, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pressure test our system again before I put everything back together, just to make sure it's good. I've got our my pressure tester here, which you can see is attached to the radiator cap. You can put pressure in the system and make sure it holds. So I'm going to go ahead and put pressure in here and make sure everything is tight and that it will hold pressure. Oh yeah, we're good. All right, I'm putting the power steering pump bracket back on now. It goes back on just like it came off with the 8 bolts that I took out earlier. So we're gonna go ahead and just slide all those on, and then I'll show you how to put the power steering pulley back on. All right, we've got all our bolts back on the power steering bracket. Next, what we have to do is put our pulley back on the power steering pump. The shaft on the inside of the power steering pump is threaded, and the reason for that is just for installing the pulley. So the power steering pump puller tool, if you have that, should come with the correct threaded bolt to install the pulley. What the? Still recording, right? Is that what the red REC means? I'm guessing? No? That means recreation time? Huh?
Yeah.
Means the camera's taking a recess. All right. Now, there we go, finally. All right, so what we've got here, this little tool, again, comes with the power steering pump installer / remover. It's got a bearing inside. You thread it onto this bolt, and then when we tighten this down, it'll push the pulley onto the shaft. So what you do is we're going to put it on like this and thread that bolt into the shaft of the power steering pump. Okay, now once that's in all the way, tighten this outer pulley part on, and make sure you want to make sure that threaded part's as far in as possible. Okay, which it is. And now this part. Now what you do is you got to tighten down this inner piece while you hold the outer bolt tight. And we're not centered at all. Thanks, Josh. Before you start, make sure your pulley's centered on there. You just tighten this down until it goes as far as it will, and then it'll stop when the pulley's all the way in place. All right, and that has gone as tight as it'll go. So now when I pull this tool off, it should be flush up against the shaft here. So I would just take this back off, break this loose first, and then unthread our center bolt. And you can see here, the shaft of the pump is flush with the face of the pulley. So that's all you have to do, and that's as far as it goes on. And that's that. All right, so I'm gonna take a minute and go get water before I fall over. Huh? I'll be back, Josh. All right, next we're gonna put the ignition coil packs back on. Again, we took it off in one big piece here, so we're gonna put them back on just the same. I'm going to start by getting that bottom one hand threaded. This is going to be kind of tricky. All right, so we got our ignition coil pack tightened on. I'm going to go plug our plugs back in. All right. And we had one coil wire pop off. We'll go ahead and put that back on too, for ignition wire. Okay. Now our coil's fully back on. What we have to do now is put our power steering water pump pulley back on. All right, and you want to kind of just eyeball where these bolt holes are with where the bolt holes on the pump are, and then you can kind of see and line it up. And then you just get them started. And we'll tighten them all down once the belt is back on, kind of like we did when we took them off. All right, so at this point we can go ahead and put our belt back on. All right, to get our belt back on, first we're going to loop it around everything, just like the belt diagram. So it goes under the crankshaft, and then it goes up over the tensioner, and then back down around the AC compressor, under this water pump, and we'll put our alternator on last. So now it's all on except the alternator, and then just loosen the tension on the tensioner and slide our belt over. Make sure everything's on the grooves and in the proper place. That's it for the belt. Now we got to tighten our power steering. I keep calling it power steering, our water pump bolts. Which to tighten it down, we're going to do just like the opposite. I'm just going to give it a few hits while tightening, and that impact force will tighten it down. All right, now we just have to put just do a quick double check on everything. Yep, and our throttle body hose is going to be next. All right, so we're going to put our air filter housing and throttle body hose back in place. The air filter housing just slides in place on that side. There we go. And then the hose just slides right back over the throttle body. And pop our breather tube back in place. Our air temp sensor plug goes back on. And this hose down here goes back on. We'll put our clamp on for the breather tube. And tighten down this hose clamp. Our very last thing to put on is going to be our throttle body shield here. All right, so everything's done. All we have to do now is fill up and burp the system. And we'll show you how to do that too. And give us just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and get all the tools out of here, and we'll jump back over and show you how to do that. All right, so what we're going to do is go ahead and top off or fill up the coolant here. I've got my burping funnel. That's optional. I prefer it because it keeps from making a mess. It makes a seal on the radiator cap and lets you fill it without spilling everywhere. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add as much as I can, and then we'll start the car and let it cycle through a full temperature range from cold to hot. And then it should hold steady, and at that time the coolant level will drop and we'll top it back off. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just let the car run. We got the coolant all filled up, and we're just going to let it cycle for a long time just to make sure that the car does not overheat and that the coolant cycles like it should. So that is how you replace the water pump on a Chevy Camaro with a 3.4 motor. This one is a 95. Again, thank you for watching. Keep APDTY in mind next time you need some auto parts. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. We're always putting out new videos. And check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/APDTY. So thank you for watching.